I used to be the one with all the energy, up before the sun, juggling everything, making life work. But cancer doesn't care about how strong you were. It just takes. My body felt like it was shrinking under me, like I was dissolving into someone I didn't recognize. The mirror showed hollow eyes, pale skin, and a scarf where my hair used to be. But even in that reflection, I tried to see someone fighting, because I was. At first, Mark was right there. He drove me to every appointment, made me chamomile tea, kissed my forehead like he still believed we were in this together. But little by little, he started to drift. The kisses turned into short texts. The tea stopped. He was always busy with work. Late meetings, random overnight trips. I kept making excuses for him, thinking maybe he was just scared. But a part of me knew something wasn't right. One afternoon, I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in my favorite blanket, half asleep after a long treatment. The TV was on, something forgettable. That's when I heard it, a voicemail playing from his phone across the room. I wasn't supposed to hear it. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I heard her voice again, soft, flirty, too familiar. "Hey, love," she said. "Last night was perfect. I miss you already." I remember sitting up so fast my vision spun. My heart wasn't racing, it was sinking. And in that moment, everything froze. The warmth I had clung to, the belief that he was just distant because of stress, shattered. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, staring at the phone like it might say something else, like maybe I misunderstood. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't the only one in his life anymore. While I was losing weight, losing sleep, losing hair, he was giving parts of himself to someone else. I couldn't breathe. It felt like betrayal was pressing down on my chest harder than the cancer ever did. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to throw something, but I didn't have the strength. So I did the only thing I could do. I listened. I listened to the rest of that message. And when it ended, I sat there in silence, realizing I was fighting for my life, while he was giving his to someone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. Sweet, smug, satisfied. My mind kept spinning in circles, replaying every late night, every vague excuse, every time he looked at me like I was a burden instead of his wife. I started to wonder how long it had been going on. Did it start when I got sick, or before that? And then the worst question. Did he ever really love me at all? I thought about confronting him. I imagined the scene, the shouting, the lies, the fake remorse. But no part of me wanted drama. I didn't want his tears. I didn't want his explanations. What I wanted was control. Because cancer had taken so much from me already. My hair, my appetite, my strength, but not my mind. That I still had. And I was going to use it. So I waited. I smiled when he came home. I let him believe I was still in the dark, but deep inside, something had shifted. I wasn't just fighting cancer anymore. I was preparing for something else entirely, and he had no idea what was coming next. I didn't rush into anything. I gave myself time to heal, time to observe, time to plan. While Mark continued with his pathetic little performance, I kept mine up too. Sweet, tired, clueless. But behind that mask, I was documenting everything. I started saving receipts he left around, copying phone numbers from call logs, even jotting down the excuses he gave me, word for word. A close friend, someone who'd stood by me through every scan and side effect, saw right through my silence. When I finally told her the truth, she didn't flinch. "Let's find out exactly who she is," she said. And just like that, we hired a private investigator. No confrontations, no chaos, just quiet, calculated truth. Weeks passed. I waited, pretended, smiled when he kissed my cheek. But my eyes had stopped seeing him as my husband. He was a puzzle, one I was ready to solve. When the investigator called, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, pretending to read a book. "We've got everything," he said. "Photos, receipts, hotel check-ins, even the address." My stomach turned, not from heartbreak this time, but from the strange satisfaction of knowing I had him cornered. The pictures were worse than I expected, not because they were graphic, but because they were so casual. He looked happy, relaxed, like a man living a second life without guilt. There was one photo that stuck with me, him carrying takeout while unlocking the front door of a small blue house. Her house. He had a key. The way his body leaned into the frame, it wasn't just infidelity, it was intimacy. When I saw her name on the deed, my breath caught. Not just because it was real, but because it was strategic. That house was bought with our money, marital money, money I'd saved, budgeted, sacrificed for, while he was planning a future without me in it. I didn't cry. Not this time. My tears had been used up long before the chemo ended. What I felt now was fire, cold and focused, and it only burned hotter when I found out he'd put her name on that deed. Her name. But every dollar came from his account, our account. He didn't just betray me emotionally. He betrayed me financially, legally, deliberately. And in that moment, I knew I wouldn't just take my dignity back. I'd take everything he thought he could hide. I stared at that address for a long time. It wasn't just a location. It was proof. Proof that while I was hooked up to IVs, counting cells, and clinging to hope, he was building a nest with someone else. And the irony? He was using the same charm, the same lines, probably even the same wine. I could almost hear him saying, "This place is just temporary until things settle down." God, he probably called her babe too. But I didn't let bitterness win. I let it fuel me. Every sleepless night became strategy. Every lie he told me became evidence. I wasn't planning revenge just for the sake of pain. I was planning justice. Quiet, devastating justice. Because the woman he thought he discarded, she wasn't gone. She was watching, calculating, becoming someone stronger than she'd ever been. I kept the file the investigator gave me tucked away in a locked drawer. Mark never noticed. He still came home like everything was fine, tossing his keys in the bowl, texting with his back to me, humming in the shower. And I let him. I let them build their little fantasy. Because in the back of my mind, I already knew how I was going to tear it all down. Finishing treatment was like coming up for air after nearly drowning. My body was still healing, but my mind had never been clearer. For the first time in months, I felt strong, not just physically, but emotionally. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I respected again, someone who'd been broken but never gave in. That version of me, she was ready, and she wasn't just going to walk away quietly. The first person I called wasn't Mark. It was a lawyer. I walked into that office with a folder full of receipts, screenshots, dates, names, and locations. Every lie he told had a timestamp. Every betrayal had proof. She didn't have to dig. I handed her everything on a silver platter. I remember the way she looked at me, tilting her head slightly, like she hadn't expected someone so calm, so prepared. We didn't just file for divorce. We filed a civil suit for emotional distress, misappropriation of marital assets, and financial abuse. The law was on my side, and more importantly, I was on my side. Every move from that point on was deliberate, legal, unshakable. I wasn't seeking pity. I was claiming power. And for the first time since my diagnosis, I finally felt in control again. The legal team moved fast. Every asset was traced. Every transfer Mark had made without my knowledge was exposed. Turns out, there were more surprises, little investments here, hidden expenses there. He thought he'd been clever. He thought I'd be too weak, too tired to fight. What he didn't realize is that cancer didn't break me. It refined me. It burned away the doubt, the fear, the hesitation. And what was left was pure resolve. I remember sitting in that office, signing papers with steady hands. There was something almost poetic about it, this quiet power, this calm control. I didn't need to shout or beg. I had facts, I had proof, and I had the law behind me. My lawyer smiled after one meeting and said, "He won't see this coming." I just nodded. That was the point. Let him stay comfortable. Let him underestimate me. I started sleeping better, eating better. Even laughing again, small things, but they mattered. My body still ached from the treatments, and my hair was just starting to grow back, but I was reclaiming pieces of myself. Day by day, choice by choice. And while Mark played house with his little secret, I was building something too, only mine was real. Mine had roots. His was about to crumble. I didn't tell anyone right away, not even my closest friends, because I wanted the silence to be mine. For so long, my life had been filled with noise, machines beeping, doctors explaining, Mark lying. But now, the quiet felt like power. Every morning I'd sit by the window, coffee in hand, reading over legal briefs instead of treatment plans. It was strange how healing could come from both medicine and justice. I remember one afternoon in particular. The sun was coming through the blinds just right, and I thought, this is what peace feels like. Not revenge, not rage, just clarity. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I was creating it, on my own terms. With every document filed, every strategy mapped out, I felt a little more whole. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding. And Mark? He still had no idea. He was living his life, wrapped in comfort and lies. But I was done letting him write my story, because I wasn't just walking away from that marriage. I was walking into something bigger, something he could never take from me again. The day of the hearing, I dressed with intention. No drama, just dignity. A soft navy suit, clean makeup, and a steady hand. When I walked into that courtroom, I didn't feel fear. I felt finished, not with the fight, but with the part of me that ever thought I needed his love to be whole. Mark was already there, sitting beside her, the other woman, who wore smugness like perfume. They whispered and laughed like it was all a game. They didn't see it coming. My lawyer began laying out the case, one carefully chosen word at a time. Emails, bank transfers, travel receipts, voice recordings. The walls of that courtroom felt tighter with every piece of evidence displayed. At first, they both looked confused, as if this wasn't real. But when her name appeared next to the deed, and the judge raised an eyebrow, the air changed. Her smirk twitched. Mark stopped tapping his pen. I didn't look at them, not once. I kept my eyes on my attorney, on the judge, on the future I was reclaiming. The other woman shifted in her seat, arms crossed. Mark leaned forward, whispering something urgently, probably for damage control. But nothing could change what they'd done, or undo what I'd built. Every betrayal had a receipt. Every lie had a paper trail. And I had brought them all. When the judge spoke, his voice was calm, but firm, like a scalpel cutting straight through pretense. He cited financial misconduct, emotional damages, and willful deceit. Then came the part that made her flinch. The property in question, purchased with marital funds and placed under a third party's name, shall be considered joint asset and divided accordingly. I could feel her panic ripple through the room before she even said a word. She exploded. "That house is mine!" she shrieked, standing up like she could argue her way out of the truth. The judge didn't even blink. Mark looked like he'd been slapped, suddenly pale and speechless. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability, and it was louder than any scream they could throw at me. People talk about justice like it's a moment, but it's not. It's a process. It's a quiet series of choices that lead to something irreversible. I didn't win because I yelled louder or cried harder. I won because I was prepared. Because I stayed quiet when it counted. And now, the silence belonged to them, not me. The ruling was final, half of everything, the accounts, the assets, and yes, their little house of secrets, was mine. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile, I simply nodded and stood up. My lawyer gathered the papers with a look of quiet pride. Behind me, I could hear the chaos unraveling, her voice breaking into angry fragments, Mark's heavy silence, the shuffle of disbelief. But I didn't turn around. Not once. As I stepped out into the hallway, the light hit me in a way it hadn't in months. There was no applause, no grand declaration, just a deep breath and the weight of something lifting off my chest. It wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming. They had stolen pieces of me, time, trust, peace. But now, I had taken something back, not just legally, emotionally, personally, powerfully. When I walked out of that courthouse, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. The scars were still there, from treatment, from betrayal, from the slow unraveling of a life I once loved. But they didn't define me anymore. I walked out not just with the deed to their so-called future. I walked out owning mine. The house sold faster than I expected. Maybe it was the location, maybe the charm, or maybe the universe just wanted it gone as much as I did. I didn't even visit it again. I let the realtor handle everything. To me, that place was never a home. It was a monument to betrayal, wrapped in siding and lies. When the check cleared, I stared at the number for a long time, and then I smiled, not out of greed, but closure. I took a portion of that money and made a quiet donation to the Cancer Foundation that helped me when I had nothing. No one knew it was me. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted something good to grow out of all the pain. Giving felt better than revenge ever could. The rest? I used it to buy a small beachfront apartment. Nothing extravagant, just a place where the air smells like salt and freedom. Moving in felt like shedding old skin. I unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet, choosing where everything went, like I was rewriting the story of who I was. No ghosts, no secrets, just sunlight, open windows, and a bed I could finally sleep in without wondering what lies were being told in the dark. It wasn't just a new address, it was a new beginning. The first morning in my new home, I brewed coffee and watched the waves roll in, slow and steady. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. What I felt was something deeper. Peace, the kind that doesn't rush in, but lingers. For so long, I had lived in survival mode. Now, I was simply living. I watered a small plant by the window and laughed at how excited I was just to see it bloom. I started writing again. Nothing serious, just little thoughts, memories, reflections. Pages filled with things I'd forgotten I still carried. Heartache, yes, but also resilience, humor, hope. There was healing in seeing it all written down, like stitching pieces of myself back together. I wasn't trying to be who I was before. I was becoming someone better, someone braver, someone free. And then one night, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I played it. Mark's voice, tired, careful, asking how I was. As if we were still characters in the same story. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. Because the version of me who would have answered? She doesn't live here anymore. Sometimes I think back to that voicemail, not because I miss him, but because it reminds me how far I've come. There was a time when his voice held weight, when his absence felt like abandonment. Now, it's just noise in the distance. He left when I was sick, fragile, unsure of everything. But I didn't stay broken. I didn't stay small. I rebuilt a life he couldn't even recognize. I filled my days with things that mattered: long walks along the beach, new books, slow meals with old friends. I started laughing from my stomach again. Real laughter, not polite, not forced. I even took a short trip by myself, something I used to be too afraid to do. Every step felt like taking back territory that had once been lost to pain and fear. My body healed. My heart, even faster. And him? He has nothing left to steal. Not my time, not my peace, not my future. That part of my life is over. The chapter is closed. I survived the illness, the lies, the silence, and now I'm thriving. Because while he walked away from a woman at her weakest, I became a woman he'll never be strong enough to face again.